Hey, I'm Andrew with 10-Minute Therapy. And in today's video, we're actually going to pick up right where we left off in our last video. Our last video, we covered the topic of negative thinking loops. And at the end of the video, I mentioned that there were essentially four steps that we can take into practically breaking negative thought loops and engaging in healthier and more fulfilling ways of thinking. So today, we're going to go through those four steps one at a time. I want this to be a very practical video, and I want it to be one that we can use to help change our own thinking and practice every day, but also maybe something that you can share with someone, a friend, or a loved one that you think might benefit from this. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start the clock, and we'll get right into it. So, in our last video, we began to look at negative thought loops. And the reality of negative thought loops is that they're things that we can all fall prey to if we're not careful. Negative thought loops, just like their name implies, are ways of thinking, patterns of thinking that have grown habitual and automatic for us. And so, what we want to do is identify them and learn how to break them. The reality is, the human brain is a pretty amazing thing because what it can do is it can become patterned into ways of thinking, emotional responses, reactions, choices, behaviors. All these things can become automatic for us based on repetition. That's what our brains are good at doing, creating patterns and habits. Think of it like this: when you woke up in the morning on any given day of the week, you might take a shower, brush your teeth, put on clean clothes, and get ready for the day. Now, chances are you've done this over and over again. You don't really have to think about doing these things. They're somewhat automatic and habitual for you. It's not as if you wake up in the morning, you take out your clipboard and go, okay, what do I do first? Oh, that's right. Take a shower. Check, done. Okay, what's next? I can't remember. Oh, right. Brush my teeth. No, that's ridiculous. They are right. We teach children to do that and we help them to build those patterns. But the hope is that with time and effort, we begin to do these things regularly without having to think about it. Because here again, my brain has become patterned into doing this. But the reality is that this works against us when it becomes a negative thought loop. So, what might start as an innocent situation where, say, I make a mistake and I'm having this deep emotional response to that mistake because I'm embarrassed and I'm angry at myself. And so I start to think, ugh, I messed up. I'm such a failure. But then that happens again and again and again. And now I've gotten myself into a negative thought loop where anytime something's not perfect, this automatic thought pops into my head. Oh, I'm such a failure. Oh, I'm a failure. I'm a failure. I'm a failure. And I start to believe this as if it's a fact, as if it's real. And it's so automatic that maybe I don't even notice it anymore. I've just come to believe it like it is a factual statement in my life. That's a good example of a negative thought loop. And that's the exact kind of example of the type of thing that we want to break. So, the steps that we want to take in order to break these negative thought loops are in no short order. Number one, awareness. Number two, questioning. Number three, examining the evidence. And number four, reframing. Now, we'll start with step one, which is awareness. Now, it might seem really obvious for me to say this, but the truth is, I can't change something that I don't have an awareness of. The reality is, we have to have awareness to know what we're changing and how to change it. So, when we say awareness, there's a couple aspects of this. Firstly, where does this negative thought loop seem to come into my life? Right? Do I have this negative thought loop? Probably not 24 hours a day. So is it when I'm laying in bed at night, my mind's just wandering? Or maybe it's in the morning as I'm getting ready for work. And maybe this negative thought loop comes up during the workday. Does this negative thought loop seem to creep in when I'm by myself or in social situations with friends and family? Or maybe again in the workday when I'm around my peers and coworkers or with that boss that I might be a little intimidated by. Does the thought loop creep in when I'm having good days or bad days? Does it seem to creep in when I'm hungry or tired? Does it come in as an emotional response to some sort of stimuli or negative circumstance? You see where I'm going with these questions. We want to identify where this pattern is happening. Identify where it's happening helps us to identify triggers. Is there a certain series of events or a person or place that seems to trigger this negative thought loop that I then automatically get caught in? And once we've identified those, the other thing we want to identify and have an awareness of is what exactly is the thought? To generically call it a negative thought loop, that's just the concept we're looking at. But what is the exact thought? Like, let's put it to words. The exact thought that I hear in my head, let me say it out loud in the exact way that I hear it. So, is that thought, I'm a failure? Or is it maybe, I always fail? Or maybe it's, I always mess things up. Maybe it's more personal than that. Maybe it's, I'm a screw up. Whatever it is, we want to put it to words and say it out loud, as hard as that is, and as harsh as that might be to hear. As a counselor, as a therapist, I can't tell you the number of times that someone has sat directly across from me on the couch in my office. And as we've examined, what is this thought? Let's start with examining it. And as they've put it to words and said it out loud, I'm a failure. All of a sudden, the number of times people have said to me, now that I say it out loud, it sounds kind of silly or it sounds ridiculous or I don't actually believe that. It's so interesting to me how freeing it is for so many people, just that first step of awareness and naming it and putting that thought to words sets them free from the lie of those words. But even if it doesn't, putting it to words becomes an essential step that helps us to make sense of what that thought is and where it's coming from. So, our second step is to question the thought. Now, here's why this is so important because here again, negative thinking loops can become automatic. So that trigger happens and I automatically think, boom, I'm a failure. And it's like I just take that thought and I accept that it's a fact and I run on with the rest of my day. We get caught in these loops over and over. So here's what we're doing when we're questioning. Number one, it means that I'm taking time to just pause for a second and make sense of what's happening there. I think that's really crucial and I think that's really important. We're breaking the automatic cycle of thought by taking a moment to pause and ask some questions of that thought. And the second important aspect of this second step is by pausing and asking questions, we start to call into question the reality of this thought. Like, is this thought really true? That's a great question. If I think I'm a failure, for example, that's the automatic thought. Is that real? Am I really a failure? Or is that maybe just how I feel? Is that more of an emotional response in the moment of frustration and anger and hurt? What if we ask the question, and this is a deeply important one: is this thought a fact or is it an opinion? You see, we do this thing. Let me pause here. If you haven't watched our video on facts and opinions, pause here, go back, watch that video, and come back to this spot. Examining whether something is a fact or an opinion is deeply important into how we challenge this and ask questions of it. So, is this thought a fact or an opinion? Here's the reality that you're going to find. More often than not, what we come to the conclusion of is it's an opinion, and it's probably a pretty negative one. A nice negative opinion like that has taken root. If we can identify that, it makes changing it a whole lot easier. But we ask questions of our thoughts, and that causes us time, gives us time and space to pause, to not let it just automatically affect me, and to call its validity into question. But here's another important aspect of asking questions of our thoughts. I want you to think about someone that you care about, someone you love. And I want you to imagine that loved one came to you and they said, "Man, I'm struggling because I've realized I'm a failure." What would you say to that person? They come to you and they say, "I'm a failure." Would you look at them in the eyes with empathy and compassion, put your hand on their shoulder and say, "You know what? You're absolutely right. You are a failure. I'm so glad you finally came to this conclusion because the cat's out of the bag. We've all known it forever. You're finally there now. We don't have to pretend around you like you're not a failure." That's ridiculous. Of course not. No, we would never treat a loved one that way. If someone came to you that you loved and said, "I feel like I'm a failure," you'd go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold up. Where are you getting this from? Like, why do you think that? You're not a failure." And you would affirm them and you would encourage them and you'd listen to them, right? So here's a good question. Why don't we treat ourselves the same way we would treat a loved one? Why don't you ask questions of your own thoughts the way you would to someone that you care about who shared them with you. So let's step two, pause and ask good questions of our thoughts. Step three is we start to examine the evidence. Now, here's why I think this is such a crucial step. So we've already sort of acknowledged and have an awareness of what this thought is and where it's coming from. And in step two, we're questioning it. Is it real? Is it a fact? Is it an opinion? Where is this coming from? What would I say to someone else who had this thought? Now we want to hold up truth alongside this thought. We want to hold up evidence alongside the thought. So it's really essential, I think, that we do this because the reality is, as human beings, we see things through comparison. The very way that our eyes work is by comparing shadow and color and light and depth and seeing these things in comparison to something. The way your brain makes sense of the size of an object is by seeing it in comparison to objects around it. Well, in the same way, when we hold this thought by itself, it might seem very true, but when we start to pull in evidence and hold that alongside it, then we start to decipher maybe this thing isn't as true as I thought. Maybe I'm not really a failure because the evidence says that I've had a lot of successes in my life. Maybe it's not true that no one loves me because the evidence shows that I have some friends and loved ones who care deeply about me, right? Maybe it's not true that I always mess things up because here's a lot of things that I've done well. And so when we examine evidence, we're holding up truth alongside this thought and we're allowing that to illuminate the reality of this thought. Because here's the deal, a lot of these negative thought loops come in absolute truths. I always fail. I always mess things up. No one cares about me. These absolute truths are not actually true. They're lies. But we can't really see the lie until we hold truth up alongside it and go, okay, I see. This isn't real. This isn't true. This isn't a fact about me. So, here again, just maybe imagine that you were talking to a loved one. What evidences might you bring to them if that loved one came to you and said, I'm a failure? You'd say, no, you're not. Look at all the good things in your life. Look at the things you've accomplished. Look at the hardships you've pushed through, right? You would bring evidence along to them. What I want is for us to learn to do this to ourselves. Let me hold up evidence and examine evidence alongside the thought that we're wrestling against and trying to change. Another way to think of this is imagine that you were to take this negative thought and bring it to a courtroom and put it on trial. And the thought says, I'm a failure, loudly and proudly, as if it is factual. And you say, okay, present your evidence. What evidence do you have that you're a failure? And meanwhile, we also bring evidence to say, here's all the reasons that you're not a failure. We don't want that thought to just live rent free in our head and loop around. What we want to do is examine evidence that might help dispel the lie of that negative thought loop. The last step, last but certainly not least, is reframing. Reframing does not mean that we ignored this thought. Let me just go ahead and stop right there and tell you, if you try to ignore negative thoughts, you know what happens? It's like you're allowing it to live up here and just run around and around. Eventually, you can't ignore it any longer. We're not just sticking our fingers in our ears saying, "No, no, 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 I can't hear you. I can't hear you." No, that thought is still there. We don't have to ignore it or pretend it's not there. We can name it. We can say it out loud. We can question it, and we can examine evidence. So reframing is not ignoring the problem, and it's not ignoring the thought. Instead, it's acknowledging the thought, but acknowledging that these thoughts often come in these very big, catastrophic, absolute truths that just aren't real. So if the automatic negative thought I have is I'm a failure, I might step back and reframe it as I'm not a failure. I make mistakes sometimes and I have failed at some things, but I've learned from those. And a lot of times I do the right thing. If the thought is I mess everything up, that's an absolute truth that we go, well, hold on, that's not real. That's not true. I don't always mess things up. In fact, I get things right a lot of times. Right. So we're simply taking a different vantage point to look at this thing from. Once we have an awareness of it, we've questioned it, we've examined evidence. Now we can say, let me reframe, change the way that thought comes. And here's how this works. It requires practice, right? So that every time that automatic thought comes back, I'm a failure. I go, whoa, hold up. That's not true. I'm not a failure. I make mistakes sometimes, but I learn from them and I grow ultimately and do quite well. If the automatic thought is no one loves me, no one cares about me, that I go, whoa, hold up, that's not true. Actually, there's a lot of people that care about me. There's the evidence. But sometimes I feel lonely. That's an emotional response. It's okay to be lonely sometimes. If the automatic thought comes in the form of, I don't really have any meaning or purpose, to be able to go, whoa, stop, that's not true. There's a lot of good things in my life in a lot of ways, and I've been able to help other people, and that's a great purpose. So we're simply reframing, we're changing the way we think about this thought rather than letting this lie exist as an absolute truth that's simply not true. We're reframing it into a realistic thought that is both digestible and acceptable and we can learn to live with. So now this thought no longer comes to me as this automatic thing. I've stopped, I've examined it, I've questioned it, I've looked at the evidence around it, and I've reframed it into a much healthier and less absolute type of thought. So there you go. 4 steps that I think are both practical and something that we need, all of us, in order to retrain our thinking. I hope this is helpful. I hope you'll take it to heart. If you notice anything in this video that you think, man, I could use some assistance with that, or that really spoke to me, like I noticed that in my own thinking, here's my encouragement to you as always. Go talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist, have your own person that can help you do this step by step so that you can live with the best mental, emotional, and spiritual health. You can live a fulfilling life. Or maybe you know someone that you care about and you think, man, they might benefit from this. Do me a favor, share the video to them, let them listen and say, hey, just take 10 minutes and listen and see if this speaks to you in any way. It does no harm to take 10 minutes of your life and listen to something good. We're going to close out our series on depression, and we're going to move on to some other topics in our next video. So I hope you'll join us then. Make sure to share this if there's things that's helpful, if people you know might benefit from it. But in the meantime, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy. God bless.